Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the Pursuit of Precision podcast. Today, we had the opportunity to interview Tony Benvenuti, one of the top performing financial advisors in the entire state of Michigan. This was an incredible one. Really interesting to hear a perspective from the corporate world. We've done a lot of self-employed type style interviews, and it was good to hear from a different perspective. So this is an awesome one. You're not going to want to miss it. Let's head to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pursuit of Precision podcast. My name is Ryan Jaros, and over the next 12 months, I'm going to be interviewing 50 of the most successful, intelligent, influential, and ultimately happy people in order to hear their story and share with all of you what I learn along the way. Today, we have Anthony Benvenuti. Thank you so much for spending the time to be here today and helping people learn and grow.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Call me Tony, though.
I can call you Tony. I want to introduce you as Anthony first, but I'm sure mom and dad would appreciate that. But yes. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start things off by kind of introducing you to the viewers, giving a little background to what your day-to-day looks like and ultimately what your position looks like current day.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to brag on you a little bit if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. So first off, Tony, not Anthony, Tony, serves as a senior vice president in wealth management at Merrill Lynch, which is a financial services company. Most recently, he was acknowledged personally by Forbes in 2022 as the number 4 next-gen wealth advisor, meaning he was the number 4 ranking advisor in the state of Michigan under the age of 40, according to Forbes. In addition, his team was acknowledged in 2023 by Forbes as well as the number 50 team in the state, managing over $600 million in assets. So amazing numbers. In addition to his professional success, he has a beautiful family, including his wife Erica and 4 young children. So again, this is just a quick spark notes of what you do and what your title is. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear a little bit more about what your position looks like, what your responsibility looks like, what your team looks like surrounding you, just to kind of get an idea of where you're at today, and then we can kind of work backwards to see how you got there.
All right, perfect. So my team consists of 4 financial advisors and 4 client associates, which are essentially our support staff. If you think about the makeup of our team, I have an equal partner. His name is Paul Jacure, and he's been in the business for about 20 years. Myself, I've been in the business for about 15, all of which have been at Merrill Lynch. And then we have 2 junior advisors that help us with our clientele as well.
Okay.
In terms of the day-to-day, our biggest responsibility is to our clients and serving their financial needs. So this could be anything from fielding calls during tax time. It could be helping them establish and maintain new accounts. Certainly it has to do with portfolio management and managing their stocks, bonds, cash, alternative investments.
Yeah, no, I want to get more into what in your position are you more so doing on a day-to-day basis. So I understand you're serving your clients in that way. More so your position specifically, who's coming to you for help? Are you physically doing all the trades? You know what I'm saying? So more so where you're at today in terms of what your day-to-day responsibility looks like.
Sure. Everybody's coming to me for help right now.
Yeah.
In addition to serving as financial advisor and lead within our team, I also recently became the resident director of the office in Auburn Hills.
Okay.
So with that, there's about 19 financial advisors in the building and roughly 20 to 25 support staff.
Okay.
So I like to think of myself in that capacity as a liaison between the firm, between management at a divisional level, to the advisors and support staff within our building.
Okay. And are you running meetings or doing things with everybody as a whole, or what does that look like? Is that something that you're responsible for, or are you focusing more so on your team specifically?
First and foremost, the team is the focus, and I'd say the resident director is more of a secondary role.
Okay.
So as it relates to the team, A day in the life for me might look something like a team huddle first thing in the morning with my key support staff. We might run through the week. We might have 2 to 3 different client meetings throughout the day and or prospect meetings. In between those meetings, I'm fielding calls that may have came in from clients. And to answer your question about the trading, we do a bulk of the trading ourselves.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I want to now again start to work backwards a little bit about where you were when you started and how you've been able to kind of scale to where you're at. Because at the end of the day, you just briefly listed off the fact that you've got, what were the numbers on how many support staff, including your new position? So you obviously have your direct team, but in addition to that, there's a number of people that are looking up to you or looking for your guidance or your expertise, or you ultimately paving the way, right? So
Right.
All of those people are maybe looking at you saying, holy smokes, wow, look at where he is. And I want to shed light more so on back to the days when you were not in that position and what you were able to do, how you were able to kind of scale yourself and build confidence to be able to get to where you are now. Because I'm sure there's a number of those people that would kill to be in your position. So
Appreciate that. So I started off in a cubicle right out of school, green, not a very big professional network, really unsure how to navigate the industry as a whole. I did have a brief glimpse into what it would be like the summer going into my senior year at college, where I did an internship at a smaller firm.
okay.
And what I gathered from that was, first and foremost, work ethic. You would work 8 to 8 Monday through Friday, and then every other Saturday it was 8 to 12. So long hours. Certainly the bulk of your time was spent away, not at home, hitting the phones, asking for referrals, doing seminars, trying to do anything and everything you could to develop a clientele, which is a very hard feat, especially, for somebody who's new, somebody who's right out of school, and is really looking to attract people that are 30 years their senior.
Yeah. And that was going to be my question is like, can you paint us more of a picture of what it looked like for you personally? I'm sure. Where did you go to college?
Central.
You went to Central and graduated. And were you doing the internship while you were in school, or was that after?
In school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit. What car did you drive? Where'd you live? I want to hear a little bit about the details.
I lived with mom and dad.
Okay. Yeah.
So born and raised in Shelby. Lived with them through the internship, and even after graduating school, I lived with them for about 3 years while I really developed and grew into my role. And that would certainly be a piece of advice that I'd share with young people is if you have that support system, if you have family that you can lean on both, emotionally and financially, if you're serious about growing in your career, take that opportunity at home, because it's going to save you a lot of money and time, and just provide resources that you don't have necessarily on your own.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to get at, is the point of I think people get detached from where you started out from and see where you're at now, and maybe don't put 2 and 2 together that you started from you didn't really have any reason or situation that put you ahead of anybody else. You ultimately started off with 0 and you were able to scale it moving forward, and that's what hopefully we're here to showcase today. So that's really cool to hear that that's where things started for you. And I guess what are some really important things that you learned early on that maybe when you made that transition from college life to now professional life, what did that look like for you? Was it something that you made a huge transition quickly, or were you, did it take you maybe 5 or 6 years to really say, okay, I'm going to take this serious at this point?
No, I think by nature I'm somebody who is serious, and right out of the gates, I definitely went in with the professional mindset. At the time, our office was much bigger, and maybe to the tune of 45 advisors and maybe another 40 support staff. So for me, I really felt like I had to go in there, prove myself, and I was a little bit reluctant, a little bit shy at first, and it wasn't because I'm a standoffish person. It was just that, for me, I really wanted to prove to the senior peers that I belonged.
Yeah.
So I put my head down, I worked hard, would do a lot of cold calling. I'd park myself in a conference room for probably 3 to 4 hours a day, minimal, and would hit the phones. And then everybody would leave at 4 or 5 o'clock, and I would stay till about 8. And me and the cleaning folks would walk out at the end of the night together.
That's amazing. That's amazing to hear, and important for people to hear. So I want to get at a little bit, where do you think that comes from? Because at the end of the day, I think there's always a reason there. Even though you say, like, naturally, I'm just a hardworking person, I think that there's always a reason behind that. Is it something where, did you see someone growing up that you looked up to, that you modeled yourself after, and you said, I want to be like that person? Or was it providing for your family? Or did you start with something that was really meaningful? Why did it matter for you so much to have success when you first started in your career?
Yeah, certainly come from a good family, instilled the right values in me. My father went to law school, worked full time, had my sister, as a young adult, and kind of scrimped and saved and had to work hard to give us a better life. So to me, that's always in the back of my mind. And then truthfully, just being a little bit fearful of failure, and wanting to succeed. And that was one of my driving motivations is fear of failure, wanting to not only make myself happy, but make others happy, and then prove to my parents that, all their sacrifice was well worth it.
And that was the thing that stood out to me as you were talking about that, was the fact that you were so grateful for the sacrifices that your parents made, that you saw the opportunity to make sure that your family didn't have to go through maybe what you did or your parents did.
Right.
And you didn't want to waste that opportunity. So that's really special to hear that meant a lot to you.
Yeah.
I do want to get into a little bit why was failure scary to you though? And that's my question. Why? Because at the end of the day, you still do have a choice. Why was failure something that was not acceptable to you?
I'm not sure, truthfully. I mean, I'm naturally always been a competitive person.
Okay.
So there was a desire to compete, a desire to win. Perhaps because part of the financial industry, one of the first ways you go about building your book of business is bringing in friends and family, and true to that nature, I think my first account was my parents, but, I didn't want to have people entrust me with their wealth, with their dollars, and then not be there for them, within a year or two.
That's huge.
So, I knew if I was going to take on the responsibility to say, yes, come on board, trust me, that I needed to be there, 2, 3, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, you had to deliver on the back end. So it's almost like you made a promise that you had to fulfill on the back end.
Correct. I would not say a promise, but an obligation, right?
Yeah.
I felt obliged to those people that if they were going to sign up with me, that I was going to, succeed personally, and that they were going to have success in their financial goals.
Yeah. So one thing I want to get into in terms of your early career, just something that I feel like is very common and kind of a pivotal moment for a lot of people when they're young, is their ego kind of gets in the way, right? So if you think back to those early days where you're talking about going in the conference room and leaving with the janitors and all those things that you just noted, those things don't happen unless you're completely set aside from your ego. Because at the end of the day, you were willing to do whatever it took. You could sit on the phone for 4 hours and have people yell at you and tell you no and tell you you're a loser and all those things that I'm sure you've heard, right?
Yeah.
But you were willing to do that.
Gotta have real thick skin for sure.
Yeah. And so could you go in a little bit into detail about why you think that's so important? Because I feel like ego does get in the way with a lot of people actually getting to where they could get. They're not tough enough to be able to accept that type of pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, didn't have an ego. I just knew that I was going to have to get through a lot of rejection, and it's a bit of a numbers game, right? It's you got to touch a lot of people to get the 1 or 2 yeses, but ultimately you don't need a ton of yeses to have some success, right? You need to surround yourself and build with the right people. So for me, ego was never really a problem. I've always kind of just fancied myself as, the person that is, a little bit of a blue collar advisor, where we're going to go out there, we're going to work hard, roll up our sleeves and be there to advocate for our clients.
Yeah. And I think that's, if I'm being honest, that's probably why you're in a leadership role at this point, because you wouldn't ask someone, anybody on your team for that matter, to do something that you hadn't already done.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge piece for people to take, is the fact that as you've scaled in your career, part of the reason of that is likely because you never got too big for your britches, where you weren't above doing any type of work, right? Mm-hmm. You were willing to do anything that you'd be asking someone else to do.
Right. Exactly. And truthfully, one of the most rewarding things that I've done in the practice, in the team, in the career is help our junior teammates, and I think it helps having been through it on our own, right?
Yeah.
It made us much more relatable to them. They understood that we had been in their shoes, and not long prior.
Yeah. No, that's unbelievable. I mean, I love hearing the stories about sitting in the conference room and getting a bunch of no's and all that kind of stuff. Did you have somebody that maybe forewarned you about that, or let you know that was okay? Because I think a lot of times maybe people simply don't have the advice to say it's okay to be told no. It's okay that you're going to get a bunch of denial up front. Was there someone that you could credit to someone giving you that forewarning or letting you know that that's okay?
Yeah, I mean, Merrill does a pretty good job within its training program where they prepare you for some of the rejection.
Yeah.
But I will say that my mentor, Paul, who also is my business partner today, he was very instrumental, and he was always there. And, similar to what I just said, kind of the blue collar, roll up your sleeves, get down to work type of a guy. So yeah, he forewarned me, and he participated with me. We'd try to put on seminars, we'd try to cold walk, we would try to cold call, we'd ask for referrals, we'd do events with clients, and yeah, he was always staying positive through it all to say, it's okay. If this person says no, and if 100 people say no, there's one person that's going to say yes.
Yeah.
So keep going, keep plowing ahead.
And so that was the main person. So I'm just trying to paint the picture for where you were when you started out. So when you came in, tell me what the infrastructure looked like again. You said there were a bunch of, obviously it was much bigger at that point in time. But where were you at in the totem pole? Where were you at in regards to that whole C?
Yeah. So when I came in, there were probably 6 to 7 people within the training program in my office specifically. And then the complex is made up of maybe 3 or 4 other offices. So multiply that by 3 or 4. So maybe 20 to 25 in the program in totality. And at the time I started, it was September of 2008. So if you recall back to those times, the world was in a financial crisis, and banks were failing, and the Fed and the Treasury were trying to play matchmaker, and they were pairing brokerages with banks. And about 2 weeks after I started, we were sold to Bank of America. And I just remember there being a big upheaval kind of throughout the boardroom, and people, quite frankly, were dissatisfied, right?
Well, I was going to ask you to go in a little deeper on what happened in 2008 and what that did to your particular career, because I think that there's a lot of situations where people could maybe use it as an excuse or say like, oh, I didn't have success in that industry because it was 2008. And what do you know? That was your start, right? So Could you talk a little bit about what that experience was like and what was actually going on in terms of the people you were talking to and what they were feeling and how you were able to talk them through how to feel better and, hey, this is how we're going to get you through and all that?
Well, I'll tell you a quick side note story with an advisor.
Okay.
I recall one morning sitting in a conference room. This is before I was registered, and I was studying for one of the licensing exams. And it's a little bit of a pastor. So he comes in one door through my back, and then he's going out the other door, and he stops, he introduces himself, and then he just goes, man, I got to ask you, what the F are you doing started in this business? I have 3 sons that are about your age, and I never tell them to get in this business. Wow. I had never met this gentleman. One of my first experiences with a senior advisor, and shell shocked to say the least. So like, just sitting here studying, didn't know how to take it. But that kind of just gives you a framework for
it wasn't a great time.
What the culture and the time was is you just had people that were stressed, both advisors, clients. You had a company that was going through a forced marriage, and they were trying to retain advisors and just kind of put the pieces together.
And that speaks so much to you, though, because at the end of the day, like I said, you were in a position where you started off as everybody else did, and it sounds like it was in a pretty bad time where a lot of people were fearful of the situation, right? And so what could you give us some advice on why? First off, let's start with that. Why did you stay? And second off, when things were hard, what allowed you to continue to progress and want to continue to figure it out?
Yeah, so feel very fortunate because of the 6 or 7 that were in our local office that were part of this program, they ended up sweeping all but 2 of us.
Okay.
And fortunately, I had some early success right out of the gate. I think I brought in my parents' accounts and then one of their good friends. And, I maintained my seat at least for, that quick period of time.
Yeah.
But they always say in our business, don't let a crisis be a wasted opportunity. And for me, and I think reflecting back on it, even though there was turmoil within financial markets, in the industry, in the business, and everything was kind of in chaos, it was really the best time to be starting because for me, I had no clients. So I hadn't lost anybody money. People weren't angry at me. And it really allowed me to go on the offensive and grow clientele because people at the time were receptive.
I was going to say, well, I was just thinking about that. That could have created some turmoil with long-standing advisors that maybe had someone for a long time and were frustrated or weren't happy with what they did and maybe gave you an at-bat for sneaking in there.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Or
yeah, you're spot on. People were definitely willing to listen to a second opinion, listen to fresh ideas. I led oftentimes with the fact that my youth was to my advantage because I could devote more time to clients because I didn't have any clients. Right?
That's huge.
And again, I talked to you about, appealing to people that were 55 plus. So as a young person, you can withstand somebody's retirement and still be in the business 30 years later.
Yeah. I mean, that's unreal that you were able to put that on the line, but that just shows your dedication to what we just talked about of you wanting to succeed and not fail, because you didn't say, well, I'm off at this time. You said, I'll do whatever. I know that I can work more than the next person. I'm going to be able to put more time and energy into it. So that's amazing to hear that you were able to put that on the line.
Right. Yeah.
So that's huge.
The other thing that people oftentimes ask is, do you feel like there was a time where you got a break, right? And it was still kind of within that time period, fourth quarter of 2008, where.
Okay. And this was year one. This is your
first one.
Okay.
I started September of 2008, went into production November 1st. And then I'd say that by end of November, early December, I got what I felt was like my first break right out of the gut.
Okay.
And it just happened to be, obtaining a list of people that had money in motion opportunities that fit our client market that ended up being very receptive to having conversations with me. And by simply having names and then doing some reconnaissance and developing phone numbers associated with those names, I was able to cold call that and turn a lot of those, names on paper into very good clients.
And could you explain to me a little bit about what that process looks like? Because to be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with how you guys are able to generate those. So you spoke of that as a group of names. Was that a business in particular, or was that what was that group of names, and why was that such a big break for you, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so it was one of the automotive companies that we had some affinity to.
Okay.
And at that point, I was able to get that from a center of influence and somebody close to me in my life.
Okay.
And what I did with that was essentially run those names through 411.com. And again, a little bit shooting dark. I didn't know where these people lived. You know, if you put in Mike Smith, you got a ton of them, and you just try to filter down on which one might be that target Mike Smith. So again, it just speaks to a lot of dialing, a lot of, wrong numbers, a lot of messages, repeated calls to these till I eventually got the right person.
Yeah. Is there anything that you could pick away as a piece of advice for people that are getting started out and getting a lot of no's? Because that's a formality, and no matter what business, even if you're not in sales, you're going to be the person that's being told no in a lot of different situations, right? And so could you give some advice in terms of how you were able to kind of stay positive or stay motivated through that process of when that was happening more than ever?
Yeah, I definitely think it helps to get a couple wins under your belt right out of the gate. But it's about mindset, right?
Yeah.
And it's about being resilient, and it's about competing with yourself to do better, and competing with yourself. Whereas if you say, hey, I'm going to go through 100 names today, and if I get nobody, I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. And just having that faith, knowing that if you do the activity, it's going to lead to the results that you want it to.
Do you think that also comes, though, from the education that you had and experience that you gained from other people in the office to say that this is the odds and this will happen if you put the time in? No, you actually knowing, would you agree with that or no?
Yes, but everybody's story is a little bit different, right?
Okay.
Sometimes people come into the business and they have family members that have been in the business. Other times they have, they're coming in and it's a second career for them. So they have a network of professionals in who they've built relationships with. So everyone's experience a little bit different. Cold calling is really a tough one and probably the lowest success rates. But again, for me, that fear of failure and the internship was pretty beneficial in the sense that, I saw people come and go. They graduate from college, and in that summer they started and left, by the time I left and went back to college.
Yeah. Would you tell us a little bit about your background? Because I know you played sports.
Yeah.
Would you say you learned a lot about competing, a lot about putting in work that isn't necessarily rewarded right away? Or some of those things that I feel like you're referencing them as they were just a part of who you are, but it could have been something that you learned or gained as you were growing up. Would you credit some of that to sports?
Absolutely, 100% sports. So background, hockey player, played competitive travel, much as when I was growing up in my youth, got to the probably the highest level of Bantam AA, where we won a national championship. And it's funny because now I feel like we live in a world of instant gratification. But you're right. Much of the hard work is done behind the scenes. It's done in practice. It's done after hours. And I guess I've just always had faith that, I know if I do the work and the activity that the results will be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, like I said, I think that's huge. And it's one of those things where you definitely look back in hindsight and you're like, oh, maybe that did have something to do with it. But I think it is important for those out there that are struggling and maybe don't understand why. Maybe they never did play sports. Maybe understanding that some of these key concepts can be developed. It's not something where you're just necessarily born a certain way, right? I think a lot of these things, if you really take the time and look at it, it was definitely learned. And it's something that you didn't have just growing up without playing sports or doing some of these other things that you were influenced by your parents or a number of different situations.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to train yourself in anything, right? And it's a discipline. So I was really disciplined about tracking the numbers.
Okay.
Right. So
are you a very analytical person in regards to how you do it?
Yeah, I like to see, kind of spreadsheets or, at least a sheet where I can see the check marks. And as you're going through that, you feel good because even if you haven't had a call picked up, you're checking through, right? And you know that you're going to put the odds in your favor as you progress through that day.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to get a little bit more into how things scaled for you. So this is still 2008, year one. Right. And you said that fourth quarter, you started cold calling and you were able to, did you land a substantial amount of those people or what did that look like in terms of your first year?
Yeah. So I think starting off, the ideal is that you have about 100 clients with $100 million in assets.
Okay.
So as you bring on people and on board, the idea is that you're going to grow wallet share. The idea is that you're going to, bring in larger households kind of as you progress within your field and that you're constantly upping the affluence of your relationships.
Okay.
So, that was the early years, and again, I told you a lot of the tactics that we used, but I think when I started to finally build scale is when Paul and I joined forces. So now he kind of shifted from mentor to business partner. And this was maybe year 4, 5, 6-ish, somewhere in that range, so it was good because as a solo practitioner, I got to do it on my own with somebody kind of overseeing me and giving me some advice and guidance, but I didn't have a full-fledged partner. which is nice, right? Because you have to be able to do it on your own first before someone else is going to, continue to invest in you and develop that relationship.
It comes down to what we talked about with getting the reps in first so that you could be able to communicate or explain to anybody else.
Exactly. And I think we both joined that partnership with the idea and the mindset of we're going to hold each other accountable. We're going to have a, kind of a buddy system where we're both going to run really hard for a period of time, and we're going to scale and grow and improve our results together. And what he lacked, I could complement, and what I lacked, he could complement, right? So
would you say that in your first 4, 5, 6 years, were you intentionally thinking of your trajectory of where you could go? Because it does seem kind of fluid in regards to how it can turn out, right? You could stay solo forever, couldn't you?
You could.
And so what was that something that you'd seen someone else do that in the past, and that was something that you saw for yourself in the future? Or I'm just trying to piece together what that transition looked like and if it was intentional at all by you.
So what I was always told was the best team is comprised of individuals that can stand alone. So for me, what I wanted to do was to put myself into a position where I could at least just be a free agent, and people were impressed enough where we could have some conversations and dialogues and present myself with opportunities.
Interesting. So yeah, so it's ultimately about the better that I can be as an individual and present myself as an individual, the more appealing I'm going to be to joining another team.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And there were some other opportunities and offers that came my way, but ultimately, Paul had developed a relationship with me. He was a mentor, and I grew to trust him. And within our business, trust is everything.
Yeah. And I want so how old is he comparatively to you?
Paul is roughly mid-50s.
He's mid,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that dynamic looked like, because when you came in, you were just this little kid, didn't know much, right? And you had to have obviously very much so impressed him throughout those years for him to be like, okay, I want you to be a partner with me, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, there's a little bit of backstory there
Okay.
too, right? So he actually spent some time he spent time in automotive working with my father.
Okay.
So there was that affinity. And then I actually met Paul at Central Michigan. I was the president of my fraternity.
Okay.
And he came up at a homecoming and was kind of walking through the campus and the house. And I met him that way. And apparently he was prospecting my dad and trying to get his business. And my dad said, hey, I got a son that's getting into that field. So we kind of connected the dots after the fact.
Okay.
But certainly, he had a rooting interest to see me succeed. And I think that's why we developed that friendship and partnership.
Oh, that's awesome. Was that a weird transition for you? Because I have to imagine that would have been tough at that point, from this guy being your mentor for a number of years, and you're just kind of, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, to when you're a partner, I mean, you both have interest in what's going on, and you at some points need to kind of stand firm on, this is my position on this, or this is what I think. Was that a tough transition for you, or what?
Truthfully, it wasn't, because Paul and I are so different.
Okay.
That, again, going back to complimenting each other, the things that he didn't want to do or didn't have an interest, I kind of naturally picked up, and I felt like I had the autonomy in his approval to kind of run with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great that you guys both had the trust in each other to be able to, I mean, and I think that comes from you guys working together for a number of years as it is.
Right.
You guys were able to almost watch from afar from how you guys handle your business. And then once that time came, it was pretty simple for you guys to say, okay, I trust the way that they're going to handle things moving forward. But I still think that is very interesting, though, that you went from mentor to partner in a quick transition like that. And it speaks a lot to Paul, honestly, for him to not, again, we talk about ego.
Yeah.
For him to not look down on you and
Sure.
be willing to give you full trust. That's pretty cool.
There is, you've seen the movie Wall Street, right? Greed is good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of greed in our business naturally.
Yeah.
And to a lesser degree at our level, financial advisors serving the retail client. But Paul was never someone who was greedy, and very clearly he paved a path for me where I could become equal partners. And I think that's important for somebody who's going to be in some type of a junior capacity, they want to be able to see their trajectory and to see themselves grow and to know that on the front end before they enter any type of a partnership.
Yeah. Okay. I want to hear a little bit more about your mentorship and what it looked like in terms of, was it very much so a watch from afar and just kind of take notes on your own? Or was it a very much scheduled sit down, hey, this is what I'm working on this week. I think you should do this. Was there a lot of feedback involved, or was it more so you just kind of observing and being a good student?
Yeah. So you had asked me if I was very analytical, right? Yeah. And going back to the yin and yang, Paul is not analytical. He's not formal. So it was very much off the cuff. If I needed something, go to him. Kind of had this open door policy where I'd be able to go in there and just kind of pick his brain. Yeah. And we did a lot of joint prospecting and joint client meetings. So from that capacity, I could see how he interacted with individuals and kind of pick apart what I liked and what I didn't and use it as my own.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important for people to know, because I think a lot of people are in search or in need or want to have a mentor, but also don't necessarily realize that it doesn't have to be a formal situation. It could be as simple as someone that you look up to at work that you're just watching or paying attention to, right? Or in your situation, you admired the way that he did things and you knew he had seniority, and so you took the time to, hey, I want to ask you about this, or you had the courage to step up and ask, right? And so I think that's a huge thing for people to take away.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on. If you have questions, you got to basically seek out your own answer. And one of the things that I've always said was an attribute of my personality is that I'm just naturally curious. So I ask a lot of questions, and that's true of client relationships. That's true of people internally to the firm. That's true of people that I might report to or people that report to me. I have to ask questions so that I better understand, so that I can ultimately kind of, get my own mind around it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's huge, because there's so many people that unfortunately I think kind of sit in the background and maybe are super curious and actually have a ton of questions. But I think it comes down to what we said of putting your ego to the side and being okay with saying something that maybe isn't right, or being told no, or a number of different rejections that could happen, right? And so I think it's important that people take away that you're going to need to step outside your comfort zone if you want to be able to learn from these people that are further ahead than you.
Yes, especially now. So in this whole work from home environment, there's some corporate cultures that are not back in the office, and people are, isolated to their house or their apartment. I think just sending an email, following up with a phone call, if you want to be mentored by somebody, you have to show initiative and show to that person that you're interested and that you're willing to kind of work with them and learn. And I think that young people really need to do that more than ever in today's environment.
And where would you prioritize mentorship in regards to education? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure you were plenty educated before you got into the industry, but yet still didn't have all the tools to make it happen, right? So I think that's absolutely necessary. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say that it's probably even more important than the formal education yourself, right? If you think of the formal education as a foundation, as a means of getting you in the door, the mentorship, the on-the-job training,